Hello viewers, welcome. Lorenzo here with another round of KSP Engineering, where we today have the LDS Nudibranch. I decided on a naming scheme. LDS stands for Lorenzo Designed Spaceship, so yeah, I think that's imaginative, and I'll let you to figure out what the rest of the theme of the line is. And indeed it is a theme because we'll have many a ship in this lineup. This first launcher does 50 tons to Low Kerbin Orbit. It has a delta V of just under 5 kilometers per second, and the weight on the pad is 350 tons just about. It's a cheap one. The launcher without the payload costs 114,000 credits, and of course, as before, we do have to ignore the payload bit. The capsule here with the fuel tanks and the mainsail under here. It's a silly spaceship. It's just there to make the weight correct, so that the payload weighs 50 tons. It will not do anything. So I'll demonstrate the launch for you. The theme is I try to keep it simple. There are easier ways to put 50 tons in orbit. It's quite a light payload. You can just put a big SLS type rocket under it and fly it up as a single stage probably, but you know, these rockets are a bit cheaper, and this is a easy configuration. So here goes with the launch, enjoying those new particle effects from the boosters in version 0.25, at least I do. The rocket shown here is fairly straightforward. We'll boost up to about 10-12 kilometers, at least until these side boosters drop away, and then turn over and motor our way into orbit. This one is designed to be easy to pilot and easy to adapt to your own designs. I mean, the payload point is here. You can pretty much plug anything that's 50 tons or less on here. As with all the other designs, you'll find the link in the video description, and I do invite you to come up with cheaper, better, different designs to do the same thing, comments, or basically share your thoughts on the ship. The LDS Nudibranch, this is it. We're going at 180 meters per second now at about 70 kilometers of altitude. It is a slightly slow ascent, but I do prefer to err on the side of going too slow in the and eating a little bit of extra gravity drag, rather than wasting all the fuel slamming into the weirdly thick air that the KSP stock aerodynamics model has. So here we are going supersonic almost, just over 13 kilometers, and well, as you can see from the staging bar, these outer stacks will drop away, leaving just the center core to finish the maneuver. Slowly pitching over now. We'll try to insert into a neat 80 kilometer orbit, something like that. I locked the outer two boosters, the gimbals on them, to have a reasoned amount of control from the gimbal on the center one. Without these two outer engines, our thrust to weight ratio drops to just above 1. We're not going to decelerate, but the acceleration slows down a little bit, at least until we burn a bit of the fuel in this last stage. Is it the last stage? Yes. After this, the payload begins. I did include some RCS and some thrusters on here. I'm not using them because of course they are part of the payload. This could be whatever. This could just be a big rock or some station module or whatever you want to use it for, really. 50-ton payload should be enough to comfortably go to the moon, to Minmus. You could make definitely a one-way Duna or Eve mission. Moho would be a little bit difficult, probably. But the atmospheres on Duna and Eve make it easy to land on, and 50 tons will be easily enough for a transfer stage there. So this launcher should be able, combined with the right landers, that is, should be able to take you to some fairly interesting destinations. Most satellites will be under 50 tons. I dare say all of them. It just depends on what you'll be doing. Oh, and I'm talking and not paying attention. We're ending up in a little bit higher orbit than I intended. That might mean we're gonna run out of fuel, because I do design these things with a fairly low tolerance for sloppy flying. But we'll see if that happens. If that happens, of course, that is a small mark against the design. You do have to be able to talk while flying your rockets. I think that's a prerequisite. But just fiddling about with the mock-up payload here, extending the solar panels for the beauty visuals. No other reason, really. So we are looking at empty fuel tanks, rapidly emptying fuel tanks, and we have about 1,000 units left. I wonder if we're gonna make it today, or did I go too high and is it not gonna happen? 140 kilometers. I am going to cut engines and wait until apoapsis, because usually this is not the best way to go. It's better to make sure you're burning while you reach your apoapsis, but I turned too late and the trajectory is now too shallow, and now I don't have any fuel. So what could happen if I kept burning is that the apoapsis here would move out to about 200 kilometers, whilst my periapsis would only be like 5 or even subterranean, and that of course is not an orbit. I have included in the payload here an SAS capability. If your payload does not have one, you might want to include that on the launcher. There's probably enough delta V to take that up. So let's see if we can round off our orbit. It would be a bit embarrassing if we now ended up not getting into orbit. I wouldn't like that. So fingers crossed. Let this be an orbit. Is it an orbit? Oh god, it's not an orbit. Oh, that's embarrassing. That's a horrible sales pitch. Oh, look at this launcher. It will almost get you into orbit. Let me try a neater flight path though. That is very much possible. I know, because I did it before. Full thrust, here we go. In order to not make these videos super long, I'm trying to keep them short, I will now, as I did in some older series, accelerate time through the stages. So there go the boosters, and next thing up are the side boosters, and I'm going to turn over a little bit earlier now at 16 kilometers, just to make sure that we don't overshoot into the higher orbits. And of course it costs energy to go high, so well, if you spend that energy on going high, you're not spending it on getting into orbit. So this is what went wrong last time. Let's not do that again. Ditching these stages. I didn't skip the turnover maneuver, because if it does work out, you have to know where to turn, so that's important information. As soon as we are now a little bit higher, we're 32 kilometers now. I'm thinking of going horizontal. Let's see, our apoapsis now is about 60. Going horizontal a little bit later. We are properly into the rarefied atmosphere now. We're at 62 kilometers apoapsis. I'm not going to go full on horizontal. We do have enough thrust to weight that we don't need to block off like a 15-minute acceleration stretch. We can just sort of boost for it. I hope. I did test this one before, and I'm fairly confident that it can work, and it will work now. So now our apoapsis reached 70 kilometers. I'm going to lock it at horizontal acceleration, SAS on, and I'll accelerate time to the end of the stage. Here we go, not quite end of stage yet, but we're at 2 kilometers per second, little bit of fuel remaining, 75 kilometers instead of 140. Difference may seem small, but it's it's almost half the altitude, and I think we're just about reaching orbit. The camera suggests that we are now in orbit. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The difference of 50 kilometers of altitude. Our orbit now is 190 kilometers by 60. So we still have to be careful. If we finish off the fuel now, our periapsis could still remain inside the atmosphere, which of course doesn't count as orbit. And this is a product demonstration, so I'm showing you the product works. It does work with the rather serious requirement that your destination be low Kerbin orbit, because this is not a high orbit, this is a low orbit, and your flight trajectory has to be sort of efficient and optimized for the Kerbin stock atmosphere. that said, you're getting 50 tons, that's a full orange tank, or 2 of the grey ones, a mainsail, some big RCS tanks, and a 3-man capsule into orbit with just 3 mainsails and some boosters. So that's good, I think. That's simple, that's effective, that's cheap. That's the LDS Nudibranch, ladies and gentlemen. Orbit established. See you next time with the next ship. Oh, that's the payload. Doesn't count. This does nothing. This is inert. So all of this got into orbit. LDS Nudibranch, people. Buy it. Love it. Tell your friends.